and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of September 18, 2024. Today an enormous number of events took place, so let's get started, and we will begin with the settlement of Ukrainsk. And yesterday, we did not have time to discuss the news that the settlement has come under the full control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Since this publication, this message came literally an hour after we finished the previous video. We will discuss the situation in Ukrainsk today. According to incoming information, units, soldiers and fighters of the 114th Brigade of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation have established full control over the settlement. In this footage, we can observe the moment when Russian soldiers raised the flag over the highest point of the settlement. Overall, there are no doubts at all that the city of Ukrainsk has come under full control, although some resources and individual sources still have certain doubts. And of course, we are talking about the pro-Ukrainian mapping service Deep State. In their maps, they show that during the latest offensive, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to gain control only over the northwestern part of the settlement and the northern part of the Terikon named Ukraine. According to their information, the western part of Ukrainsk, as well as the southern part of the Terikon named Ukraine, is either in a contested zone or still in a gray zone. In general, we have completely colored the map, as there had been multiple reports and geolocation videos of the capture of settlements surrounding a certain ring. There may still be isolated pockets of resistance within the territory of Ukrainsk, but apparently these pockets of resistance will no longer be able to exit the settlement itself. In the last 24 hours, information has been received that Russian units have moved further west towards the settlement of Tsukurina without the slightest delay, while some separate units have advanced south towards Horniak. But again, regarding both Horniak and Tsukurina, over the past 2 weeks, I believe we have received news about each settlement at least 6 times stating that Russian units have entered both places, but so far without any clear geolocations that could confirm this. In the Nivolsky Cauldron, some cartographers note a further slight advance of the Russian army. Overall, the footage shows, the maps indicate further tightening of the pressure and further expulsion of Ukrainian units from this artillery pocket. In the southern Donetsk direction, there have been no updates at all in the last few days. Overall, it seemed that the Russian army had taken a small operational pause for regrouping and to move further west towards the settlements of Bohoyavlenka and Ulidar. And today, in general, all these assumptions began to gradually come true. We will start with the settlement of Vodyane. Slightly to the north, Russian units are expanding their zone of control, and in fact the settlement of Vodyane is gradually transforming into the flower of Vodyane, which is also gradually blooming and expanding. In this footage, we see a small assault operation carried out by Russian units, specifically stormtroopers. Only one transport vehicle is used for the landing, and the assault troops are deployed on the forest edge located north of the settlement, effectively clearing it. Based on this footage, a map update is taking place. Just north, along the Konstantinivka-Pobeda line, we also colored the map, and this information is generally confirmed by a number of neutral cartographers. All the colorations were made based on footage of FPV drones striking Russian equipment, which can now effectively move freely between Konstantinovka and Pobeda. In these frames, we can observe Russian tanks equipped with, let's say, blades, which are intended for clearing minefields. The equipment was moving along the T-0524 road from Konstantinovka between Konstantinovka and Pobeda, and strikes were being delivered along this road. These footage primarily confirm and likely suggest that the forest strip located west of the T-0524 highway, that is, this entire area, is apparently already under the control of Russian units. So far, no geolocations have been reported on this matter, but I assume that Russian tanks with mine rollers would hardly be able to move freely along the T-0524 road if Ukrainian positions were located at the farm and in the tree line from the farm to Pobeda. Next, we are moving towards the settlement itself. And from here, a large number of geolocations have been received in the last 24 hours, and here are the most important geolocations. Let's take a look at them and study them in detail. And in these frames, we can observe artillery preparation, a powerful artillery strike on the western part of the northeastern and eastern sections of the settlement of Uglidar. In fact, this direction, this very section, is being reduced to rubble, and we can unequivocally conclude that right before our eyes a genuine artillery preparation is unfolding ahead of a powerful assault. I remind you that the last time we saw something similar, which we were able to observe in the area of the settlement of Vodyanova, after that Russian forces launched a large-scale offensive, and the settlement came under the control of the Russian army. Let me remind you, let's take another look at the footage. We see powerful work, explosions, secondary detonations, arrivals of FABs, artillery, then there was an assault, followed by the occupation of at least half of the settlement, at least according to the geolocations. As for the actual state of affairs, there are currently no changes. Well, again, we see the same picture now in Uglidar itself. In summary, we expect that in the near future, Russian forces will begin assault actions towards the Garage cooperative located in the northeastern part, as well as towards the Daka settlement located in eastern Uglidar. If Russian forces manage to establish a foothold in these parts of the city, it will effectively mark the beginning of the end for the settlement itself. At the same time, FABs are operating over the settlement of Bohoyavlinka and Yelizavetovka with the aim of slowing down the transfer of reinforcements and destroying temporary deployment points. Overall, the goal is to ensure that Ukrainian units from Bohoyavlinka do not interfere with Russian soldiers as they clear and complete their operations in Uglidar. This means focusing on logistics and reserves. Additionally, today there is information that Russian units have begun the assault on the settlement of Katerinovka. There are currently no geolocations that could confirm this, but again, we have been discussing it very frequently over the last few days, whether Russian units have approached closely or are about to arrive. The information was generally coming through many channels from independent sources, and in essence, there is likely no point in doubting it. Next, we will move to the Toretsk, New York agglomeration, but let's stop for a moment in Pokrovsk. There are also important geolocations and significant footage here. Information is coming from the settlement of Hrodovka. As you can see, there has been a significant and powerful shift in favor of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the territory of Grodovka. This report was made based on 3 videos that were received over the course of 2 days. More precisely, 3 items, 2 videos and 1 icon, which were received over the course of 2 days. Yesterday, we observed footage of Russian units moving quite calmly in the western part of the settlement. The stormtroopers are moving along the destroyed houses, conducting a final sweep. Based on this footage, a breakthrough occurred just yesterday, which we discussed. Today, first, there were cartographic changes reported on a pro-Ukrainian service, and in these images we see that according to Ukrainian data, approximately 80–90% of the village is under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Today, Ukrainian sources are publishing footage of strikes on a building located on the Ukrainian side of the Zhuravka River. In these images, we do not see either the flag of the Russian Federation, Russian soldiers, or anything else. The author of this video simply claims that a temporary deployment point of Russian troops on this side of the river has been directly destroyed. This means that 90% of Grodovka is effectively under the control of the Russian armed forces. This building was destroyed. It is here, according to the author of the previous video, that Russian soldiers were located. That is, based on all this, the majority of cartographers were misled. There are several important points, one of which is the crossing of the Zhuravka River. Here comes Zhuravka moving from the north to the southwest towards Novohrodivka. In fact, this river acted as a kind of natural barrier, an obstacle that prevented Russian units from advancing further towards Pokrovsk. As we understand, such a barrier no longer exists. Next, we move with you to the Toretsk, New York agglomeration. Ukrainian sources have published footage of artillery strikes on the forward positions of the Russian army along the M20 road. We won't watch these frames to the end, but overall the work of the IHPV drones is somewhere around this point. Based on this footage, there has been a slight adjustment along the front line, meaning we can specifically see the forward positions of the Russian army to the southwest of Alexandropol. Next, we move towards the Toretsk, New York agglomeration. Toretsk, where significant changes have occurred on the map over the past day. I remind you that just yesterday we were updating the map in the area of southern Toretsk, according to separate data from individual neutral cartographers. That is, an entire block, an entire quarter and more were marked as disputed territory, including the spoil heap of the Valyuga mine. Apparently this area has come under the control of the Russian armed forces. We are just waiting for any videos now. However, the main events are already unfolding today in the central part of Toretsk, and a large number of geolocations from neutral to pro-Russian and pro-Ukrainian cartographers are noting and confirming the advancement of Russian armed forces further to the west. from the side of the correctional colony. There are geolocations, including those that confirm this information. In these frames, we can observe the work of the 100th Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, striking at Russian assault troops moving westward towards the central part. At the same time, information is being published from the Toretsk citadel, which is an area of high-rise construction that has already been effectively, practically, and essentially destroyed. The footage shows the movement of a Ukrainian soldier who is advancing to the frontline position to an area that is effectively already in contact. In these footage, if you listen to them with sound, if you watch them with sound, you can hear a large number of actual combat actions, gunfire, shots from grenade launchers and mortars, and it all gives the impression that it is happening very, very close. That is to say, it can now be stated that assault actions are being carried out towards this citadel. And if the Russian armed forces manage to further expand their control zone and penetrate deeper into the defenses of the Ukrainian armed forces, then overall a very bleak and unpromising picture is emerging here. In Toretsk. Next, we are moving towards Chasov Yar. Over the past day, there have been no significant changes here. Probably the most important footage is coming from the M32 highway. I would like to remind you that in the last few days there has been information about a breakthrough in the defense of the Ukrainian armed forces and the crossing of the Seversky Channel in Donetsk, Donbass. And now Russian armed forces are trying to move further towards Chasov Yar. Work is underway on the strongholds located along the N32 highway. These footage shows a drone strike on a Ukrainian howitzer or on a position at this location. Next, we are moving in the northern direction where combat actions continue in the area of the settlement of Verkhnekamianske. Since the beginning of September, the Russian armed forces have specifically determined this area as the direction in which they will operate. In the last few days, the main strikes have been focused on a point near this small lake or reservoir, and today the focus has shifted to the northeastern part of Verkhnekamianske. In this footage, we can also observe the work on the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces using artillery, drones, and so on. In general, the footage confirms a gradual shift of the artillery focus and the focus of drones further west, closer to Seversky, and possibly in the near future, after such a massive artillery preparation and the extensive destruction of Ukrainian positions, the deployment of assault groups will begin. Next, we will move towards the Kupinskoye direction. Let's start with the northern part of the Kupinsk front, where on one side the area of the Tverkov flower of sand is continuing to expand, and Russian armed forces are gradually clearing out strongholds in the fields. Again, as a rule, where a drone strike occurs, Russian units are likely to move in that direction, and in any case, all evidence confirms that the next target is the Oskol River. Slightly to the north, in Petropavlivka, the Russian armed forces continue to carry out airstrikes on the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces. There are very high losses, quite significant damage, and we discuss the concentration of strikes in this direction in almost every video. And today, there was also a change in the map in favor of the Russian armed forces based on footage published by the armed forces of Ukraine. In these frames, one can observe the clearing of a stronghold of the Russian armed forces in the northwestern part of Petropavlivka, specifically at this point. That is, these footage confirms that the forest located between Petropavlivka and Sinkivka is under the control of the Russian armed forces. Next, we move with you towards the Kursk direction, where combat actions continue around the perimeter, but overall there are no additional changes in the maps there. The advance of the Russian armed forces has slowed down significantly. It is quite difficult to speculate on the reasons for this. Perhaps this is related to the fact that, in general, let's say the element of surprise has passed. Reinforcements have been redeployed to the SO, which is gradually beginning to stabilize the front line. The Russian army has been halted. This only indicates that further advancement will be associated with high time costs, as was the case during the Ukrainian offensive. In these frames, we can observe the operation of a Ukrainian flamethrower drone along this forest strip, which confirms the control of the Russian army. As for other directions and areas on the Kursk salient, the most significant event is coming from the region of Russian Porekhnoe and Cherkaskoye Porekhnoe. Pay attention to the number of air bomb and artillery strikes. In general, all these frames indicate that the Russian army is operating here with maximum intensity. It is possible that a decisive strike will be delivered soon, along the line of Bolshoye Soldatskoye, Dalino Russian Porekhnoe, and Cherkaskoye Porekhnoe. It is from this outcrop, from this foothold, that the largest number of operational reports from the Russian artillery always comes. Overall, since the beginning of the month, the work here has been quite intensive, specifically in this area. Next, we move with you towards the Bryansk direction, from where a large amount of information is also coming. To be more precise, There is an extremely high level of activity, let's say, from Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups. And here, the Russian National Guard is responsible for this section of the front. And here we see the work of artillery and the operations of FPV drones against the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Bryansk border area. In other words, one could conclude that we are not observing anything substantial or serious here, just activity. But if we increase the number of updates since September 1, we see that in this section, this particular section, there is the highest concentration of Russian focus. This is definitely not without reason. Most likely something is about to happen here in the near future. Overall, if we make a prediction, it is quite likely that Ukrainian units will attempt to reach the A240 road, which in turn connects the city of Bryansk with the Republic of Belarus. The main objective of such a possible offensive by the armed forces of Ukraine is precisely to cross this route and cut off this large section of Bryansk region from the mainland. And here, the main goal of this offensive apparently is not so much to cut off, but rather a possible attempt to involve the Republic of Belarus in this conflict. As today, around this time, Alexander Grigoryevich Lukashenko noted that an attack on Belarus is the beginning of the Third World War. Alexander Grigoryevich Lukashenko also added that Belarus expects a serious escalation of the conflict in Ukraine in the near future, specifically in September-October, and that the possible location of this escalation will be the Republic of Belarus. In other words, something is gradually heating up here, and it is unclear what will happen, but there are too many signals, too many alarms indicating that something might occur. And of course, the most important footage today comes from, let's say, an arms depot located in the area of the settlement of Toropets. The armed forces of Ukraine have launched an attack. It is still unclear what exactly was used. It could be drones that possibly came from the Baltic states, or it could be a strike from a long-range missile, for which Ukraine has indeed received authorization for use from Western sponsors. It's hard to say, and there are no answers yet, but there are footage of explosions, there is footage of secondary detonations, and there are now 2 days during which the fire shows no signs of ending. The first footage was indeed of the self-detonation at the warehouse, and now we see the morning several hours later with the fire still raging and the secondary detonations not coming to an end. Sources indicate that the serious blow has resulted in damage estimated at around $40 million in terms of armaments. This figure may be significantly underestimated regarding this area. It is also worth noting that some military experts suggest that the strike may have been launched from the Baltic states, as the distance in this case is 540 meters. 500, 280, 580, 290 kilometers. And if we consider the distance from the Chernihiv region, specifically from the area of activity of the sabotage and reconnaissance groups in the ISU, where we are observing, then in that case, if we bypass the Republic of Belarus and enter its territory, the distance is about 480 kilometers. Well, it's hard to say, of course, what happened. In any case, the answers to these questions are surely already known to the Russian leadership. Efforts are currently underway to decide what to do about this. And that's all, dear friends. The Military Reports channel reminds you that we condemn any violence in the world and call for immediate negotiations from all sides.